Way to save the season to throw. Fire down! Incomplete down at the goal line by San Diego. Tomlinson off the left side. Tomlinson sidestep. Hello, history books. They have to now. Here's Sproles. Sproles inside the 10, inside the 5, and the Chargers win the game.
Welcome back, everybody. Garrett, Jamie, Craig, three of us all back together. Thank you, Craig and Jamie, for taking over the last two shows we've had. You guys have held it down, so thank you for that. And put it in the chat, but people were asking me, asking Craig. Lightning Round got hit up too. Super stickers, super chat now available. So have at it. We open that up for you if you want to be a part of it. So TLR Roundtable. We didn't do it last week for the holiday, so we're going to go over our Discord questions. We got Twitter questions. We're going to go over some bad tweets. So, Craig, I'm going to start you off. Anybody got anything you want to add before we start off here?
Just hope everybody had a great Thanksgiving, enjoyed a nice, relaxing weekend with family.
Yes.
And glad to be back.
Absolutely.
Yeah, folks. Hopefully you got to enjoy all the food, and well, the Chargers did what they did after the fact, so at least you got to be able to enjoy your holiday and your family first, and then they let you down later. So thanks to them for that.
Yeah, we know all about it, and we expect it at this point, really.
Cool. So first up, we got RMAC. So when we get a top 10 pick, do you guys think we should trade back for multiple picks? This team just has so many holes. What you got on that one, Jamie? What do you think?
Would I trade back if I was the general manager? Yes, I would trade back. I would be a trading machine, both with draft picks and current contracts. The second I got the opportunity to start the offseason. Do I think they will? No, they're not going to trade back. It's just not what they do. They're going to stay pat, and they're probably going to draft another offensive lineman or a linebacker or something of the like, because they like to make us miserable and piss us off.
Now, are you assuming that Tom Telesco and Brandon Staley are going to have a shot at drafting?
Oh.
Yeah. All right. So I think so I mean, it makes the most sense to trade back, especially if they're in the top 10. The question says if they have a top 10 pick, and if they have a top 10 pick, they should definitely trade back and move down a few spots at the very least, because this is a pretty strong QB draft class. And I haven't got into any of the draft stuff. I know we've talked about it in the past. We haven't dove into these position groups, but on the surface, we know Caleb Williams, Drake May, and even Jaden Daniels are going to be going most likely in the first round. But then I think that Washington quarterback, Michael Penix Jr., is probably going to be somebody that teams are going to be wanting to go after, because after that, it's like Bo Nix and JJ McCarthy. And I think if you're in that range, you're probably going to want to take the swing on Penix and get ahead of that. So I think the Chargers have the possibility to do it, because if they do have a top 10 pick, I think, there's probably going to be another quarterback that's going to be at least in the discussion there. So I would say yes. I would make that deal. I would pick up some picks and hopefully fill in some of those holes you're talking about, because yes, Chargers have many on this roster.
Yep, I'm going to go ahead and say I concur with you guys on that one. I'm definitely trading back. I'm in the top 10. Too many positions of need. Some spots that they thought they filled, but definitely picked the wrong person. So maybe you have to do it over. And unfortunately, when you swing and you miss, you don't just, stick with it. I mean, the good teams don't. They find a way to fix what they screwed up, as opposed to just being stubborn about it and thinking they're smarter than everyone, which the Chargers often do and fail. So yeah, I definitely trade back, collect the extra picks. But You actually mentioned a name in there, Garrett, that I want to get Jamie's opinion on, because I know that he wasn't the biggest Jaden Daniels fan at ASU. How do you feel about the ascension? I've been meaning to ask you about that. Just keep forgetting.
Yeah, I mean, I haven't seen a lot of LSU football games this year, but from what I have seen, highlights and bits and pieces of games, he looks like he has really turned the corner in terms of his pocket awareness and seeing the field, which were my two biggest knocks on him. Was he was a guy who was going to go through one, maybe two reads and run. And now he's hanging in the pocket. He's making tough throws. He's making all the throws. He's seeing the whole field, and he's getting the ball down the field. And he was always kind of a turnover prone check down merchant when he was at ASU and early in his time at LSU. So he's been phenomenal this year. I think he's probably far exceeded the expectations that anybody had for him going into this year. And the Heisman talk is probably pretty warranted based on what he's done statistically and how he's elevated that LSU team, which historically has had horrible quarterback play. So he's a guy who, if he's quarterback 2, quarterback 3 on the list, he's earned it based on the way he's played this year. He's completely changed my opinion of who he was going into this year and even early in the year.
Yeah, I know you were pretty staunchly not a fan of his. So again, I was just curious to see what you thought about him now, because that is a pretty miraculous turnaround that he made. As you mentioned, LSU, not necessarily known for quarterback play. You had the Joe Burrow situation, which seemed somewhat miraculous. And then to follow that up shortly thereafter with Jaden is kind of unprecedented for them. So good, man. Glad you had a change of heart there. I was wondering if you were holding a grudge against him.
Well, I still do hold a grudge against him, but I got to evaluate him based on his play. I mean,
fair. Yeah.
It's not personal.
I think there are questions to be asked about him in terms of his character, because he was a guy who promised ASU he was going to stay, and then he bolted for more money, for NIL money. So you got to wonder, I mean, he told the whole locker room he was coming back. He promised Herm he was coming back. And granted, Herm got fired, but Herm got fired after Jaden left. So I think there's some questions that are fair to be asked. But in terms of his play on the field, we say we're fair and balanced here. He's been great this year. I can't say anything else and expect to be taken seriously.
All right, there's number 2.
All righty. So I'm blowing my screen back up here. Sorry. So this is from Big Joe. Say Harbaugh stays at Michigan and isn't available. Who would be your ideal head coach candidate to replace Staley? Ooh-wee, Garrett.
Ideal, and we're being somewhat realistic. There could be a scenario where Sean McDermott's available. Bills are kind of falling off a little bit. A lot of fans are talking about how he just can't take them to the promised land. He's had issues in the playoffs. They just had a big loss against the Eagles. Fans are turning against him. I could theoretically see a scenario much like Philly did with Andy Reid, and cut McDermott just because he isn't, the guy they had hoped and hadn't got as far, even though they got in the playoffs. At some point, if you're not getting very deep in the playoffs, it's an issue. So I could see McDermott getting let go at some point. And if that's the case, then I would want McDermott and have him succeed with a new change of scenery like Reid did.
Okay. What's up, Jamie?
Being that I want to hire an experienced head coach, somebody who I know can come in and change the culture and win, my preference would be an offensive guy, but Harbaugh's not even an offensive guy really. So I'm not going to stick to that too much. I would say 2 names that come to mind as guys who have been head coaches, who have had success, and who might be looking for head coaching jobs for different reasons. One would be Mike Vrabel, who it seems like there's a chance that he could get fired this year based on the way they've played the last 2 years. And the other, which I don't love, I wouldn't say ideal, but it's somebody I would take a look at from an experience standpoint, and somebody who you'd think could grow in a second opportunity, would be Dan Quinn, the defensive coordinator for the Cowboys, just because he's He's taken a team to the Super Bowl. He's shown he can win games. I think he get the defensive parts working again. You worry about, having to hire an offensive coordinator and putting Herbert through the cycle of never ending offensive coordinators. Those are a couple names I would look at. In terms of somebody who isn't experienced, probably Bobby Slowick, because of what he's doing in with the Texans.
Mm-hmm. Fan of his.
Okay. Makes sense. You guys actually kind of mentioned two names that were high up on my list because.
Oh, really? Oh man.
Well, I mean,
I was trying to go left a little bit.
Unfortunately, all my chips are pretty much pushed in on Harbaugh. That's, of course, I think all of our selection, but since that's not an option, I was actually thinking variable first and foremost after that. When you're talking about someone who can come in and definitely change the culture, has the type of attitude that you want from a leader. He seems to know how to conduct himself with the players, having been a former player himself also. So he has that experience. And I mean, just look at the dude, the way that he goes about coaching the game. He has a physical mentality. So, the running game is going to be important to him. I mean, look at what they're doing in Tennessee and what their history has been here recently under his tenure. But also, he's kind of gotten a little bit of a raw deal in Tennessee with some of the selections, some of the trades. So I think he was doing just fine before upper management got in the way and kind of screwed with things a bit. And then, probably McDermott. And even though I know that we don't necessarily want another defensive-minded guy, I'm cool with a defensive guy that has a significant amount of experience. So you were a DC for a long time. You've been a head coach for a little bit. It's not like some new fresh-faced kid coming in that has no resume to speak of. We've been down that road multiple times, so I want no parts of that. And we're talking guys, first-year guys, and I know we want to stay far, far away from that. There are actually two names that come to mind, and I'm rattling off a bunch here. I know we just needed one, but just kind of where we are. Actually, like Press Taylor, the OC for the Jacksonville Jaguars. I'm a fan of Press Taylor. I like him a lot. Behind that is a name we're familiar with, Frank Smith. We know what he's doing, and I'm a little concerned about that because I'm not sure how much input he has offensively there. I'd like to learn a little bit more about that, but we know what he is, as far as being a coach, a positional coach, somebody who knows about the running game, former running game coordinator, can come back in and assert that into the offense that, sorely needed for the Chargers. So those are some of the names that are at the top of my list, but above everyone else, Mr. Harbaugh, first and foremost.
So no Ben Johnson, no Brian, no Todd Monken. You went a little, no?
No.
Those
So
guys
they're
are
on
below
the
your
list.
guys?
I literally have a list. Like
Okay.
it's got a list of like 7 names. Ben Johnson and Brian Johnson are like the next 2 guys after the names I mentioned.
Okay. All right. Okay. Let's here we go. Got our first question here from Blazing Bolts. Super chat. Thoughts on the fan base not wanting to go to home games this year? How do you guys feel about the fans bailing on the season?
Is this actually a thing? I hadn't heard that.
I hadn't either. I was hoping you had.
I mean, if it's an actual thing, I mean, I don't have season tickets. If I had season tickets and I was in a position to go to games every weekend and I was sitting through the same game every weekend over and over and over again, I might be looking for different ways to spend my Sunday just because I've got a family. And what's the average ticket price? $400 or $500? I mean, it makes sense. If they're not winning and they don't seem to be showing any interest in improving or making any changes, the only way you can really push back and, make your displeasure heard is by selling those tickets and not going to games. So, I mean, it makes sense.
Lots to do in LA, man. Better ways to spend your money and your time. I can't imagine, like Jamie mentioned, just feeding cash to a product that doesn't improve and to an ownership that seems to not really care to do anything above service level to make you feel better about the product they're putting out on the field. So, yeah, man, I didn't know this was a thing, but if it is, cool. I understand. You live in a market like that where there's a million things to pick to do on a Sunday? Why would you want to choose to be miserable if you had the option? I mean, we kind of sign up for that by being fans already of this team for the most part, but with so many opportunities to enjoy your life and not have to deal with the additional stress associated with it, if you have that option and this team's dragging you down, screw it. Do what you want to do.
Yeah. I mean, it doesn't make you any less of a fan because you didn't go. Which I'm sure that's not what Blazing Bolts is asking, but and I also didn't know this was the thing. So maybe Blazing Bolts is, going to home games and hearing this stuff. But I will say, when I had season tickets back when they were in San Diego, I had season tickets and I went to every game, even when they were bad. And that was because I drank a lot in the parking lot and I consumed a lot of food in the parking lot. So I did it with my buddies. So it was like 3 hours to just hang. And then we cared less about losing because the Chargers were good and draft picks were more important then. But we still had a good time with friends and some family that came and still drank a lot in the parking lot and still ate a lot in the parking lot. So, if you want to go for the experience and just drink and tailgate and all that, I say keep doing it because that's what I did. But I'm also older now. And I don't think that I would be doing that now, especially for half the season. With how it's going
I think it all kind of depends on where you are in life. I also feel like if you have kids and you're taking them to that game every week and subjecting them to that misery, and they get to the point of crying, I'm not bringing my kids to that every week.
Your kids are gonna be like, I'd rather do homework. Like they'd rather go home and study than.
Hey, they're playing a lot.
I know.
So
yeah. So Blazing Bolts actually lives in Bakersfield. He drives to LA, which is a commitment. Good for you, Blazing Bolts.
Commendable. That's impressive.
Yeah. Are you a season ticket holder?
He must be if he's driving to games.
Yeah.
Dude, it took me 2 hours to get almost from SoFi to my hotel, which was a mile and a half away. So that's real dedication, actually.
He is not a season ticket holder. That makes it a little bit easier to go.
Yep.
If you're not going
to not have to do it for every home game.
Yeah. Yeah. I say do it. All right. Moving on. Question number 3. Sorry about that.
All right. So blowing this up again. After the QJ versus Zay debacle the last 2 weeks, QJ not sorry, let me start. After the QJ versus Zay debacle the last 2 weeks, was QJ not playing earlier what's going on?
Yeah, this question was mangled, and when you sent it to me and I I saved it, I was like,
I think I skimmed through it.
Okay.
So all right, I think it's just kind of out of order. Was QJ not playing earlier less, not having a plan, but Staley refusing to play a sub NFL player after Telesco saddled him with the pick? So
what do you think, Craig?
If I'm understanding the question correctly, I think it's out of order. So thinking back,
it's not out of order.
Okay.
He's saying, was it less about Staley not having a plan, or was it less about not having a plan than Staley refusing to play somebody who wasn't good enough to be on the field?
Okay, no, I get it overall, but it's just the order in which it's listed. So after the QJ versus Zay debacle, like that to me is.
Oh yeah, got it.
So anyway, cool. I get what you're saying. So in the grand scheme of things, I don't think Staley has the huevos to refuse to play someone that maybe upper management would be demanding him to. I don't like, as far as just completely not playing him whatsoever, saying I'm not putting this guy in, even though you could argue, well, he kind of had an excuse. He leaned somewhat on the injury the last game, but then also kind of backed off of it a little bit. He was a little all over the place. But the plan all along was for them to bring him along slowly. So I don't think from the beginning they ever intended on putting him on the field early. He kind of had an out with sitting him behind Mike and Palmer. And then, of course, we all knew what happened once 2 and 3 went down. He has to get on the field a little bit more often. So you can't really bring him along the way you intended. As far as like watching what happened last week with Zay, I mean, are we really all that shocked about it? We spent a lot of time looking at QJ and the rest of the wide receiver prospects this offseason, and we had our feelings about where QJ belonged, and he was not any of our top 3 or 4 receivers. Definitely not in the top 3 for anyone, I don't think. I don't see Staley having, again, the stones to just say, I'm not putting this guy in because he can't play. That's also spitting in the face of the front office and saying, you guys apparently don't know how to pick players. He is seemingly, on the hot seat. And the further we get towards the end of the season, maybe he feels a little bit more empowered to just do what he feels like doing. Maybe because it could potentially be at the end of his rope. But still, I don't see Brandon Staley as being that guy. So I think it's just the fact that it worked out the way that it did, but I'm not necessarily sure that he's just taking this hardline stance that he's not going to play him because he's not good.
And Staley was pretty emphatic during the press conference after the game. I don't know if you saw it, that he was that it was an injury that kept him out, QJ out of the game, and not because he was benched. So I know you could say like maybe he's just doing coach speak, but he just flat out said JC Jackson wasn't playing because of performance issues. So you'd assume he would do the same. I don't think he's lying about that. I just think, there's just no plan with QJ, and QJ's confidence is just so low right now.
Didn't he contradict himself though? He said he was hurt, and then he said he went in the tent and he was fine or something.
Yeah, that's what I was saying. He's gone back and he waffled. So at the end of the game, it was one thing. And then I think in, I guess maybe a person that wasn't public yesterday, he kind of backed off of it and said that he wasn't necessarily, I don't know. He definitely contradicted himself though.
But what he was saying was he got injured. He went into the tent, came back out. They said he was okay, but it was a rib injury. And Staley decided that with a wide receiver having a reach with a rib injury, he didn't want to put him on the field at that point.
Like he ever reaches for anything.
Yeah.
He's
going to hurt his rib with all the body catching.
The nose of the football might break the rib.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, I know it's a different position, but you've kind of thrown your quarterback to the wolves a few times when maybe he shouldn't have been playing. So, I mean, I get that that's your guy and he's the motor of the offense, but they've definitely thrown Herbo out there in situations where I feel like he should have been playing. So, I mean, having that level of consideration for a guy who's not producing at this point seems interesting.
You could argue they did that on Sunday with Herbert. He took a big hit at the end of the game. He's wincing. You can tell he's in pain. They're down 10 with 1:30 to go, and he's back out there on the field. That made no sense to me. No. They weren't going to win that game. But in terms of this question, I mean, I think the weirdest thing about this is QJ coming out in camp and saying he was wide receiver 3. He was going to be a starter. So somewhere along the lines, there was an expectation that he was going to be on the field a lot. And then it didn't play out that way once the season started. Granted, he was wide receiver 4. And you kind of figured they were going to give Palmer a chance to hold on to wide receiver 3 going into the season. But to use a first round pick on a wide receiver who does something that the team obviously sorely misses and desperately needs, and then not have a plan to use him in that role is just baffling to me. Like, you're okay with him sitting on the bench all year if everybody's healthy, and even when he's on the field, you're still not using him to his strengths. So I think him not being on the field is just a reflection of him getting into camp and then being like, holy shit, what did we do? Like, this guy isn't catching the ball. He's not blocking. He's in the wrong place. I mean, I think if you go back and watch previous games, I think you can find 3 or 4 times a game where he's running the wrong route or is in the wrong place. So he's just not good enough to be on the field. They need him to be on the field because they don't have any other options. But right now, Alex Erickson is better than QJ, and that's a problem.
It sure is.
I didn't know Alex Erickson was 31 years old. No idea.
I didn't realize that either until they said it on Sunday.
I forgot he existed. I mean, I remember hearing his name a long time ago, and I didn't even realize he was still in the league until the Chargers signed him.
Leave it up to the Chargers.
All right, let's go to Twitter.
Another QJ question. Alex Boltup says, now that QJ is looking like a bust, if you had a do-over and you could pick between Zay Flowers or Jordan Addison, who would you choose? Craig, why don't you go run with this one first?
Y'all all know the answer to this question, man. I've been touting Zay Flowers since 2021. Addison's the more natural wide receiver, but Zay's a weapon. So you can kind of deploy him in a multitude of ways if you want to throw him in the backfield and stress defenses that way, horizontally, like you're doing with Darius Davis, but you can also use him vertically, which the Baltimore Ravens clearly have no problem doing. And he gives you value on special teams as well as a returner. So I feel like you can do a bit more with him than Addison. I could see the argument being made for Addison again, as he is more of a pure wideout. But again, I see Zay as more of a weapon. And he's someone that the Chargers could have used in a multitude of ways. And with the way that they have receivers dropping like flies, you can just kind of plug Zay in and say, hey, I need you to do a little bit of this, a little bit of that. And maybe you can fill in the gap. So Zay was the way that I would have gone then. It's the choice that I'd say I'd make still to this day.
Garrett?
You go ahead, Jamie. I got lots of thoughts. I want you to go ahead and start.
Okay, so first of all, everybody knows how I felt about the QJ pick. I was not a fan of him going into the draft. Was not a fan of picking him where they did with the other wide receivers on the board. But, and I can't believe I'm in this position. I think we need to stop referring to him as a bust 11 games in. He's been disappointing. He is not producing. He is struggling with all the things that we said he would struggle with leading up to and after the draft, after they picked him. Having said that, it's 11 games and he's 21 years old. A lot can happen between now and the start of next year. He's got 4 years left on his contract. Well, at least 3 years left on his contract. I think we need to pump the brakes a little bit on the bust talk and just recognize that he's struggling because he's not physical and he's not a good route runner and he's raw and he needs work. Having said that, I would go with Flowers. I wanted Flowers going into the draft. He was my guy. I'd be happy with either Flowers or Addison, but I would go with Flowers because I think he offers everything the Chargers needed at the wide receiver position going into this draft. And because he's so drastically different from anything the Chargers have at wide receiver, they would have been more motivated to get him on the field faster, and he would have been more productive and a bigger part of the offense much sooner. I think the fact that you can look at QJ and say, and people say it even though it's wrong, oh, he's another Mike Williams, or oh, he's another Josh Palmer. He's so redundant in terms of his size, and people think that he's redundant in terms of his skill set, that it's easier to keep him off the field. I think Zay would have forced his way on the field much faster, and I think he's a better football player, and I would have taken him over QJ. The only person I would not have taken over Jay would have been JSN. Even though he would have been redundant, I just think he's such a good receiver that I would have taken him. But Zay is exactly what they needed. He was a perfect fit. He was on the board. They didn't take him. It was a huge blunder, and they're going to struggle with it for the next couple of years.
So my answer is the same, and I just want to back you guys up because if you guys are new here, we do a draft podcast. We break down these wide receivers. We go over. We had, I think, over 150 different prospects we did during the offseason. We go through every position group, and one of them is wide receiver. And as you can see, going back, and we're talking months ago, this is our draft guide from wide receivers. Not a single person on this podcast right now had Quentin Johnson any higher than wide receiver 4. We all had JSN, Zay Flowers, Jordan Addison. That's your answer. It's who we had. Zay Flowers was the best fit. If we want to go back and dig up the video from the live draft podcast, all three of us, you're going to hear the same thing. We all wanted Zay Flowers before the pick. We were not very happy when they made the pick. When they picked Quentin Johnston, we all thought it was just going to happen because it's such a Chargers pick. When you have two explosive players on the board still, they weren't going to take them because of thresholds and whatever else. This is who we had. And we're talking March is when this out. Was it March, April when we had this out? April.
End of April. Yep, right
They
before the
tried
draft.
to ruin my birthday. I remember it well.
Months. And quite honestly, I am so this bus thing kind of set me off a little bit because like we're talking about how we didn't think he was going to be very good in the first year. We talked about how there were some traits that weren't all going to be totally transferable year one. Did we think it was going to be this bad that a cornerback's going to have more receiving yards and touchdowns than he is, than Quentin Johnston, Deron Bland? No, we didn't. But also, we can't call him a bust. So it's way too early for that stuff. And I know we all want to be quick to judge, and it's funny to call him a bust already and to pile on. But I'm also pretty sick of like the recency bias with a lot of these. I don't want to say podcasts, but people on Chargers Twitter on my timeline, because it's like all off season, you know, they pushed this team. People were talking about how they were Super Bowl contenders and they were going to make a deep playoff run. And a couple people talked about how Staley was going to be coach of the year and how QJ was going to be up for rookie of the year, offensive rookie of the year. And nobody's backtracking now. Like everybody's not talking about all the toxic positivity going into the season. And then now they're off the train and they're talking about, and this isn't on Alex because I'm not talking about Alex, but like now everybody's off the train and talking about him being a bust. I mean, during the draft process, those were the three wide receivers we had in order 1, 2, 3. We all had them based on their play. It did not change when the Chargers drafted QJ, but yet people had QJ as their wide receiver 1 on Chargers Twitter, and nobody's coming to the table with any of that. I don't know. It just feels like 8 months ago we had your answer, and the answer was Zay Flowers. So to answer your question, the answer is Zay Flowers, and I don't think we can call QJ a bust. I don't think we can base a wide receiver's performance on clips from training camp. And so I just want to say, you knew the answer back when we were doing this draft podcast. It just all, as soon as I saw this, it was like, did you just start listening? I mean, this is what we've had this. We had this talk months ago. We would have picked Zay Flowers. Then we would have picked Jordan Addison. And then maybe after that, QJ. It was in that order.
Well,
and I think some of us might have even taken Josh Downs over QJ just based on what the Chargers needed. And
yeah, I think,
he was my wide receiver 4, I believe.
Not ranking wise, but just in terms of what the Chargers needed and how he fit, I think maybe all of us would have taken Downs over QJ.
In terms of fit?
Here's the funny part. So about calling him a bust, it also means that you're not giving him any credit for the fact that the Chargers aren't even attempting to use him properly. So they're not getting him the ball in situations or in ways to where you can use him for what he does best. They're essentially asking him to be a Mike Williams replacement. And you knew when you looked at him on film, if you paid attention, and they get paid millions of dollars to do this, that wasn't the proper way to use him. And yet week after week after week, they continue to try. And so they're not doing him any favors. They're asking the kid to do all the things that he was terrible at in college and expecting him to produce. So I don't think, of course, it's year one. Wouldn't be fair to call any rookie a real bust in that way, but especially not. I mean, we didn't love the kid. We just sit here and told you, and you watched us during our draft profiles explain that as well. But the truth of the matter is it got to be honest and fair all the way around. They're not using him the way that they should. So it's hurting his growth. They're literally stunting his growth, arresting his development, and that's not all of his fault.
Garrett, can you pull those rankings up one more time? I just wanted to point something out real quick.
Yeah, let me. I already got rid of it because of.
So I'm assuming most of the people who are listening right now have seen our draft content. If not, before Garrett puts this up, I'm just going to say, Here it comes. So we all do our own homework. We all watch film independently of each other. And yeah, we'll text each other and, hey, check out this game, or hey, check out this play.
But that's usually like sleepers and stuff.
Yeah.
We're not saying, like, hey, JSN's my number one. We're not going that route.
No, we don't. Yeah. We don't share our rankings. We don't share our numbers, but we'll say, hey, if you want to watch a game, a great game, go watch JSN play whatever, Michigan and whatever. Or holy shit, we'll call out games or plays that we love, right? But we don't share our numbers, we don't share our rankings. But if Garrett pulls this number up, it's just amazing. It always amazes me, and it amazes me even more this year because Craig was new to the process. Look how similar our rankings are and our numbers are from top to bottom, especially the first like 5 or 6 spots. It is crazy that we come up with these numbers and these rankings and we don't talk about it at all. It's a surprise when we talk about it on the show.
But we also do our grades based on skills within the position too.
Correct. Yeah, we use skill sets.
We use the same scale. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
We're using the same scale. We have our own grading system, but that doesn't guarantee that they're going to turn out the same.
No, and I bet you if you compared notes, like somebody's probably higher on one part of the scale than the other, and it just evens out in the end, and somehow we all land on the same number.
Yep. Yeah, I just thought it was really interesting. Yeah. Like anybody who's seen our draft stuff, you guys know we put in a ton of work, and I'm not saying that to toot our own horn, but I just think it's interesting. Every year we do our own stuff. We don't share our numbers. We even added a third person, and Craig did this last year, and I just look at how similar this stuff is. It's crazy.
Yeah. And the chat, Kev's asking why everybody missed on Puka, but I didn't even watch him this year. He wasn't even part of my watch. That doesn't look like you guys did either. Yeah. So that's our excuse. I don't know about everybody else. And 31 other football teams,
the NFL missed him.
Yeah, that's 31 other professionals. But in terms of us, we didn't have time to watch them. All right, we got some questions here. We're going to catch up on Blazing Bolt is back. Another question: why don't we get the Chargers get Everett more involved? He plays like Giannis from the Milwaukee Bucks, like a power forward.
I ask myself that every week, especially the last 2 weeks. He's caught a big play on the first possession on a crossing route or a deep over on the first possession of the last 2 weeks, and then he disappears from the game almost entirely after that. It
takes 3 defenders with him, extends the play 4 or 5 more yards, and then we don't see from him again.
He can make plays at all 3 levels of the defense. He breaks tackles. He runs like a Mack truck. He's so difficult to tackle. He's so physical, and you can just see it. He just wants it. There's just a level of fight and desire in him that you just don't get from a lot of these guys right now. So I don't get it. I can't explain it. It's super frustrating. But yeah, they definitely need to use Everett more because he's obviously a talent. He's not an elite tight end, but in this offense, he could do a lot of damage if they just, schemed for him more and found ways to get him open in that intermediate range behind the linebackers. And he's such a tough matchup for linebackers.
It's another lie we were told. Let's start there. Because they wanted to get the tight ends more involved, specifically in the middle of the field and the seams to threaten teams vertically. They won't do that. Also, you drafted a guy for his run after catch ability. And going back to the QJ thing, but this ties in because guess who else is great after the catch? The tight end that you hardly use. It's a little disrespectful, actually. When they need a big play and Keenan's double covered, then they'll say, hey, Jared, go make something happen for us. And after that, all right, cool. Just go do some more cardio for the rest of the game. We'll call you when we need you. I mean, nothing about the offense makes sense whatsoever. But it's just another point that I'm making here with regard to using guys to their strengths. The team just refuses to do it. And when you're limited in the amount of playmakers you have, then you have to lean on the guys that you can depend on. Gerald's had some drops here or there, but, I mean, he's a dynamic player with the ball in his hands. And I mean, if there's no Keenan and Eckler seems to be a shell of his former self right now, then that's someone that you definitely need to implement into the offense a bit more. So it feels disrespectful, but it also just falls in line with the fact that this team really doesn't have a plan for anyone. They're just kind of winging it week to week.
Yeah, I mean, what's the deal? I mean, what's the deal? That sounds like
what
is the deal with Gerald Everett? You don't have Mike Williams. You don't have Joshua Palmer. Your first round draft pick can't get any separation. Outside of Keenan, who else are you going to? Gerald Everett is the answer. Get him more targets. I know.
It's not the answer.
But well, that's our answer. That's not Staley's answer or whoever else or Moore or Herbert or anybody.
He's not a part of the game flow.
Yeah. And that's the weird thing too is tight ends were such a big part of the offense in Dallas for Moore.
Oh my gosh.
And they still can't figure out a way to get these guys involved. You'll see a flash play here or there from all three of them. They'll each make like a play a game and then they just disappear. It's so frustrating.
Yeah. Yeah. It's crazy. So the answer is we don't know, and they should. All right. Next one from the super chat from Quentin Arcega Whiteside. Oh, that's great. Good for you, dude. Or
Brilliant.
ma'am, whoever you are. Oh, that's awesome. Oh, that's funny. I didn't see it. Quentin Arcega Whiteside says, was Zion a bad pick? If we're not calling Quentin Johnston a bust yet, can we say that Zion was a bust and a bad pick yet?
You know what? I'm gonna chime in here really quickly. I'm not ready to say he was a bad pick just based on what was going on at the time and what they needed. It made sense. I would say that if you look at the offensive line as a whole, there's regression. So I think there's a bigger question to be asked there. It's more so lending itself towards coaching. I'm not ready to say that Zion was a bad pick. In hindsight, it's easy to say that in year 2, and you're still seeing him struggle, even though he moved to another position, which is actually his natural position. I still think there's something there to work with. He's got all the requisite tools. I just think right now there's a development issue, and I'm leaning on that because I'm seeing it across the offensive line as a whole. So I'm going to give him a little bit of credit there.
Yeah, I mean, I think we're certainly trending in the direction of being able to say he was a bad pick. But at the time, he was the highest rated player on the board. He was they had him rated as the 10th highest player on their draft board at the time.
Mhm.
And they had him on the board at, 17, 18, something like that. So from a process standpoint, I think they made the right pick. They picked the highest rated player on the board. It hasn't worked out. They played him on the right. Now they moved him to the left. There's no Lindsley. And like Craig said, the whole line is struggling. I mean, even Slater is struggling. Pipkins has gone back to being garbage.
Pumpkins.
They've
Nice.
all regressed on some level. So I think there is something going on there, that the line isn't gelling. I think Lindsley not being there has a lot to do with it from a communication standpoint. But I also think, Zion struggling in pass protection, he just hasn't been very good, and they've got to figure something out fast, with the whole line, but especially with their first round guard, because they need him to produce.
Definitely. So I'm not ready to say it's a bad pick or he's a bust. And also I'm giving him a little bit of grace, not only because it's, halfway through his second year, but also moving back over to left guard. He played right guard, new position. He lost Corey Lindsley. Now he's playing next to Will Clapp. Maybe that's excuses, but right now I'm not ready to say it's a bad pick yet, but it is trending that way, and he's got to get better. If he's not improved by the third year, I think you could say it's a bad pick, because by year 3 he should have it figured out. All right, go ahead. Sorry, somebody.
I was just going to say, you'd hate to do this to a kid 3 years in a row, but would you talk about moving him to center with everything going on with Lindsey? Not this year, but maybe next year in the offseason?
Absolutely. I thought that was going to be the plan when they drafted him. Start him in a guard and then eventually be the heir apparent at center. Well, Lindsey was done.
I don't think he's going to be the answer at right tackle, but maybe he'll be more successful playing center. I don't know.
Yeah, I'd rather Sally or play right tackle than Zion at this point.
I don't want either one of them at tackle personally.
No, I don't, but I'm just saying if I had to pick one of the young guards.
So you thinking moving Zion to center and McFadden in the left guard potentially?
Potentially.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe you throw some money in a low-level veteran guard, like a mid-tier guy. I don't know. I don't know what the answer is. They got to do something for Zion.
Spitballing.
And you're complicating things for him by moving him to center, because now he's got to pick up protections and be able to communicate what he's seeing, and the level of complexity increases for him by doing that. But they got to figure something out, because they need more out of him. Bad.
I mean, that was the rap when they drafted him, though. He was a really, really smart kid. He was like a leader on that line at Boston College. So it made sense in theory to put him at center. But yeah, it's a whole different animal. I know he played a little bit in college, but if he's not succeeding at guard, which is supposed to be his natural position, center, I don't know, might be too much. But
more on his plate.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. The next question from the super chat from Kylos13. Quentin Johnson or Buster Davis? You can't take Buster Davis. You can't.
I'll let you guys, man. I hate to say it. Hell no, man. I mean, first of all,
Can't take Buster Davis.
you asked for it. You drafted a dude named Buster Davis. Come on. And again, I don't want to, talk.
I mean, his name is Craig. So.
Oh yeah, that is true.
Let's not do that.
Mhm.
I would say that I hold my own weight. I think I do okay. But unfortunately, we cannot ignore the fact that yes, his nickname was Buster. You asked for it a bit, but yeah, I mean, we still don't necessarily know what QJ is going to be. You could kind of see where Buster wouldn't have fit into the offense, really. Just based on skill set, you understood how they wanted to use him, but you could see the flaws in his game, not his game itself, not necessarily transferring over to the NFL game. But QJ still has some stuff that if they were to use him properly, you could definitely exploit. And I don't know. I'd probably still roll with QJ. It's weird to say that, but that's where I'm going.
Yeah, I think you have to take QJ. I mean, Buster Davis was a guy who I don't think anybody really thought was going to be a first-round pick when they took him. It seemed like a huge reach at the time. QJ's got all the physical tools except for the hands. He has the measurables. He looks the part, and now you just have to make him be the part, which we'll see if they can develop him that way. But it's QJ. I mean, he's the better athlete. You could see where you would think he'd be the better player long term.
I would venture to say that QJ probably has more yards than Buster Davis did his first year as a Charger. It was definitely under 200. Don't you think? Anyway, it's QJ. But I'm going to look up that number. But
I was going to look it up. How many yards do we think Buster Davis had for his career?
Career?
Oh,
I remember it being like So I think it was under 200 his rookie year, and QJ's at like 190 or something.
Play like the Price is Right.
So
$1.
all right. So his first year, he didn't do very well. He had under 200 yards. I'm just going off memory. He had four or 5 years with the Chargers. 4, because they didn't have a rookie scale. So they didn't have a 5th year option. So under 200 yards. He definitely got injured his second year. I want to say he didn't even make it his third year. But he had a pretty good year his 4th year. Because I remember during that season, people were like, is he finally back? But it didn't end up being all that well.
He definitely did end with over 1,000 yards.
No. I'm thinking we're talking like 560 lower.
558 in 4 years.
Bro, I was off by 2 yards.
188 yards and 1 touchdown on 20 catches in his rookie year.
See, QJ already has more yards than Buster in his first year.
10 combined catches for 111 yards his next 2 years, and then 21 for 259 and a score his last year.
Oh, God.
Man. So, but he got injured his second and third season, right?
He played 4 games his second year and 1 game his third year.
I thought so. Oh boy. All right. Next super chat. And if anybody puts it in super chat, we have to answer it. So
should we start calling Craig Buster?
Hey, y'all want me to leave the pod? Get me out of here?
Charles Michael Sinclair. When is Garrett dropping the Discord bomb? What Discord bomb are we referring to?
I've been stirring them up today. I didn't tell them anything. But I've been having some fun.
I definitely didn't participate in that at all.
Jamie. Oh, did you give hints or something? Or
all I did was some memes and some emojis. I didn't
okay, so
say anything.
All right, so the question wasn't what is the bomb? When? Boy. I want to say soon, but could it even be soon? We'll say soonish. Soonish is
Hey,
Sometime this week, right?
I would think so, but I don't know. Soon. So we'll say soon, and hopefully this week. All right. So let's go ahead and get back to the questions. This week, okay? Just to answer his question because I don't want to leave him hanging. All right. Back to Twitter. We're past this, right? We don't need to talk about QJ anymore.
From Kevin Adrien. Would taking Brock Bowers in the first round over more premier positions like cornerback, edge, and offensive line make sense? I'm assuming the Chargers finished 7 somewhere between 7 and 10 and draft. Oh, I'm sorry. I'm assuming the Chargers finished 7 and 10 and draft in the top 10. The team needs to draft Herbert's next number one weapon, and he'd be the perfect all-around fit.
7 to 10 is top 10. Thank you, Kevin.
He's saying the record 7 and 10.
Oh,
that's how I read it at first.
Oh, okay.
He thinks they're going to lose 10 games and finish in the top 10.
Hey, Kevin, we're the dummies, not you. Yeah. Sorry, I don't mean to take this. I just started going. On paper, it doesn't make sense to take Brock Bowers. And I mean, I say that without doing the draft prep, but if you're drafting top 10, it's got to be like a tackle or a corner, or probably a more premium position in my mind. If you're going top 10, again, we haven't watched everybody, so it's hard to say who's worth a top 10 pick. And I haven't watched any particular position group in detail, but Brock Bowers is a lot of fun. I think it'd be one of those like, hey, it's fun. I don't hate it, but they'd have to like make up for it a lot going forward in the draft. Like they'd be behind basically going into day 2 if they drafted Brock Bowers, because while tight end is important and I know that he needs another weapon, they got a lot of holes to fill, like we talked about earlier on this roster. So I would say it, on paper, doesn't make sense, but they could make it work if they, killed it in the next couple rounds.
Greg?
I don't hate it. I know that tight end isn't technically a premium position, but Brock Bowers is a premium player, and that is an instant difference maker on the offensive side of the ball. It's a position the Chargers sorely lack. He can be a security blanket for Justin Herbert, and he's a big playmaker. Now, granted, I understand that that may not be a popular choice just based on the position, but once again, I'd be okay with it. But I also think it depends on who's making the selection, because we don't know what direction the offense will go in if we're talking about a new head coach. And Brock Bowers can be utilized in several different ways. He could be an asset in the passing game. I'm not sure about him as a blocker. I know that he gives like tremendous effort. He's definitely an animal when it comes to effort on the field. So I can't wait to dig into his tape a little bit more. But it's not a position that I would be staunchly against. I'd be fine with it if it were him, just based on what I've seen from him in his college production thus far.
I haven't watched Brock at all. Haven't watched any film on him, so I can't speak to him on the field. I've seen some highlights and things like that. But, I think if you're drafting 7 to 10, you need a premium position. And I think the key is you need to find a position that affects the quarterback, whether it's on offense or defense. And I guess it depends on where you're drafting the top 10 too. Because if you're top 5 or 6, you might have a shot at Marvin Harrison Jr., which totally changes the makeup of this offense. If you're drafting outside the top 5 or 6, you could be looking at somebody like Jared Verse or the tackle from Penn State. I'm blanking on his name right now, but there are a number of guys that you could get who could impact the quarterback in different ways. So part of part of the reason the Chargers are in the situation they're in right now is because they have not been very good at building from the inside out for most of Tom Telesco's tenure. And I think that's something that assuming Staley is not the head coach, I think right now we're all pretty much assuming he's gone one way or the other. Let's say he gets fired at the end of the year and they hire a new head coach, whether it's Harbaugh or anybody else. I would assume whoever's going to come in is going to want to build the team from the inside out, which to me probably means edge or offensive line, unless something falls to them that they just can't turn down. So I would say it's a long-winded way of saying I would rather take an edge player or an offensive lineman, I think, or Marvin Harrison Jr. if he's there.
Mm-hmm.
But if you're towards the end of the top 10, it's worth at least having the conversation. I just don't know that that's the right place to do it.
Yeah.
I think you spelled it out for me much better, Jamie, because it all really kind of boils down to who's available. Like we're talking Marvin Harrison anywhere around there, then sorry, Brock. We're definitely going with Maserati Marv. And as far as the rest of the team is concerned, the Chargers have a very huge issue with building from the inside out. Part of that comes from Tom Telesco and being of the Bill Polian school of team building. He also did that in Indianapolis. A lot of smaller guys in positions where you kind of need bigger bodies and valuing more of the skill players. So but if you're throwing Marvin Harrison's name in there, Brock, we can pretend Brock's not even there if Marvin's around. So I would go that direction if he was available.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it feels like Marvin Harrison Jr. is in the top 2 or 3. Like in all the mocks right now, he's the first non-quarterback going to the Cardinals range. But I mean, if he's available, I'd go Marvin Harrison Jr. over Brock any day. All right. Another super chat from Blazing Bolts. Thanks, bud. Third time today.
Money bags.
Thoughts on Popper Whopper getting feisty with we're not using that.
No, sir.
That's the only time you'll be able to use that because we're not using that. Thoughts on Popper getting feisty with Staley on the post-game interviews?
I mean, we've been talking about this for a while, right? It just
kind of torn on this.
They're getting feisty with each other, and lately it's been more Staley, I think, getting feisty than Popper. But I think Staley determined several weeks ago. I'm sorry. I think Popper determined several weeks ago that Staley was probably on thin ice, and he's started taking some liberties in the press conferences,
which he's done in the past.
Bringing up Jacksonville and pushing that button as often as he can, trying to get the soundbite he wants. But lately, I just think Staley's done, and he kind of knows he's done, so he's pushing back, and he's not going to take any crap from Popper. On one level, I think it's Popper's job to ask some of those questions. On another level, he went through it with Lynn too. I think he kind of has a tendency to make it a little personal at times when he feels like the head coach is on the way out, and he feels like he's comfortable taking cheap shots, for lack of a better term. So he's kind of walking that line. It's like sometimes I feel like he's trying to make himself part of the story. Sometimes he's just doing his job and asking tough questions, and there's a fine line there.
Yeah. I think I've been torn on this because it feels like at times he's being feisty because he is just trying to get some kind of soundbite out of it rather than trying to, ask a real tough question. Because bring up the Jacksonville thing, once or twice was fine. But then when he went on it, 2 weeks after the fact, after Staley basically said, stop asking that, and he kept going at it. I'm not saying you have to stop when the coach says so, but what's even the point at that point? He's trying to create the story, talk about his failures, and then hope to get a reaction out of them. Those I don't like, because I feel like at the beginning of the season, he wasn't all that feisty with Staley. When they were winning, he wasn't feisty. He wasn't asking the tough questions. It's now when his seat is unbelievably hot that he starts to take those cheap shots a little bit. That just doesn't really feel right. If he was doing that through the whole time, now he does ask some hard questions. He's not as soft as a lot of other reporters, but you could tell he's ramped it up knowing that, and he did this with Lynn, that once their seat is real hot, he can just kind of let loose a little bit more. And I don't really think is a good way of going about it.
I mean, there's definitely a personal element to it, but also myself being a card carrying member, VIP of Club Petty, I respect it. There's a little bit of me that loves it, but when you look at some of the articles that he writes, he's clearly taking little pot shots and digs at Staley.
Mm-hmm.
So there's this thing where, as Jamie mentioned, when we can see the writing on the wall with the coach, as he did with Lynn, a la Lynn, he has a tendency to go a little bit harder at him. And yes, there's an element to journalism to where you're in reporting to where you have to do your job, but there is also a fine line of journalism 101, report the story, don't be it. And he kind of straddles it. Again, I appreciate the work that he puts in, the fact that he's not afraid to ask some of the tough questions. But at this point, he knows that, he's probably going to get a reaction out of Staley, one that's going to elicit and maybe some more attention to any article that he may write, or just it's a quick and easy soundbite. People clip that stuff up and they enjoy it all week long. And it's a way to just kind of dig at a guy who clearly looks like he's crumbling because he can see the end coming. So I respect Popper for what he does, even though it does feel maybe a tad bit going over the line, maybe a little.
Was Popper the one that asked him and kept asking him about changing defensive play callers?
I don't think that was Popper
No.
that initially asked the question, but I think he asked a follow-up question in relation to that. So I think he jumped on the opportunity to further it. If I'm not
Yeah, he wasn't the one who asked originally. No. And I knew this was going to happen as soon as we opened up the stickers in the chat. This is from Spike WK. This dude, referring to Blazing Bolts, has got to be a plant to encourage people to pay money to get the questions asked. Not happening.
Interesting.
Not a plant. You don't have to pay money to get your questions answered on the show. Hasn't been the case from the beginning. Won't be from here on out. Definitely not a plant. And we'll be answering everybody's questions. They just moving to the top of the line. That's all. And it was a joke. Damn it, Spike. Where is the context of this? I can't tell you're joking. Spike.
See,
Anyway,
man,
if anybody
you
else
almost got lit up for no reason, man.
Damn it.
See,
I'm glad you did say it was a joke, because I was gonna lay into you a little bit. Definitely don't have to pay to ask questions. If you feel obliged to do so, just like when we open donations up, feel free to do so. All right, so here we go. And I don't know what your LMAO was referring to, man. I thought you were laughing that we had a plant on the stream, is what I thought. So anyway, moving on to the last one.
All right, question for the roundtable. Assuming new head coach and GM, would you rip the Band-Aids off the roster by stripping it more than just to get cap compliant, I'm assuming he's saying, and taking the cap hits in 2024 to hopefully have a roster ready to compete in 25 and 26? They always screwed Rivers with patchwork rebuilds.
T-Wise, thank you. Jamie? What do you think?
I alluded to this earlier. I think they would be foolish not to be shopping as many people as they can to see what they can get for them. They've got a lot of very highly paid veterans on this roster, some of whom are producing, some of whom are not. But even some of the guys who are not producing, I'm sure there's a team out there who was going to think, well, if we get him in our system, he'll be better. I think we can be pretty safe to say they're going to keep Keenan, and they're probably going to have to move on from Mike at the end of the year. Does he have trade value? I don't know. But you got to think somebody's going to want a 27 or 28-year-old wide receiver who may or may not be one of the best jump ball receivers in the league, a quote unquote deep threat. Somebody's going to want him.
I know who would. They're in your division.
Oh, I mean, think about trading him to the Texans with the wide receiver group they have. I mean, there are guys who I think there are a number of teams with young quarterbacks who would love him. The Panthers might be another one. You'd think there'd be opportunities there. Bosa, if they decide to stay with Mac, which as Craig and I talked about on After Hours last week, Mac is there. He's got the production. He's got the availability. You can justify the leadership. You can justify the expenditure for Mac. You cannot justify the expenditure for Joey Bosa right now. You just can't. He's under contract for 2 or 3 more years. He's always hurt. He's got the penalty issues. he was very productive this year when he was on the field, but he's just not on the field enough. And we know, the Ravens reached out and tried to trade for him before the deadline. So somebody's going to have some interest in him. I would definitely at least have conversations about Derwin to see who's got interest in him if they're not going to use him properly. There are just guys who I think they could probably find some trade value for. It may not be what they want, but it could clear some cap and give them an opportunity to rebuild. So yes, I would be looking to strip things down and start over and rebuild around Herbert. They need to cut salary to be able to afford his contract over the next few years. And they need to be able to bring in cheaper talent to surround him with draft picks to be able to sustain his contract. And they're going to need to replace Keenan in the short term in the next couple of years. So yeah, I would be looking to trade people, strip it down, and start over. Even if it hurts for 2024, I think it'll pay off sooner rather than later.
Yeah, absolutely. And if Brandon Cooks has trade value, Mike Williams has trade value. I mean, Cooks was just traded and he's 30 this season, I think. I think Mike Williams has trade value. Some team is going to want him for sure.
Maybe not what they want.
Oh,
but
sure.
Trade value.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Greg?
Quick and dirty for me. I mean, Jamie pretty much covered all the bases. But this is the price you pay when you don't take advantage of a quarterback on a rookie deal. You didn't build your team up properly, and you paid guys who are underperforming or not available. So chickens come home to roost at some point. So now, you have to make some tough decisions. And this isn't going to necessarily be a patch job. Now, I mean, again, this all kind of hinges upon who is making the calls going into next year. And the level of development and the type of system that they can implement. Maybe it, works better with the players that they have and they salvage some of it, but still you've got to clip some of these guys for the purposes of not just becoming cap compliant, but looking forward to the future. And you've got to build it around Herbert because you're paying him as the franchise player. So yeah, there are some names that you definitely need to shop, particularly the guys who are overpaid and underproducing or are not available. So right there with you.
It feels like Herbert, Mac, Keenan are three guys that have worked their asses off this year, and everybody else has been a big question mark, So at the beginning of the season, it felt like Mac was gone this upcoming offseason. We were talking about it earlier in the year, but it feels like it's swapped a little bit because Mac has really played his ass off and coming up on, I think, a career year coming up here.
Potentially.
He's playing great.
And I mean, real quickly, just to throw something in about Derwin, I think if you go and look at his production since Staley's gotten there, it's gotten worse every year. And I know that, and Jamie and I talked about this also on After Hours a bit, maybe some of the injuries have taken their toll, but I don't think Derwin's fallen off to the point to where he should be playing the way that he is now. You could argue a lot of some of his regression is associated with the fact that he's being used improperly. So once again, a new voice, a new system, maybe changes that. And you would think about holding on to an impact player like that if you can. But if you're going to do the same old things with them, you probably need to be open to shopping him.
Okay. And yeah, you could add Thule to that list, by the way. Yes, you can put him.
Then we're talking more like along the line of vet guys
that,
even though they might be a little older, some of them have definitely showed up and produced this year.
Yeah, and I've had that same thought, Craig, about them wasting his rookie contract like multiple times this year. It just sucks that they missed that window. All right, Kevin Hughes, before we get on to bad tweets, the super chat, worst Chargers draft pick of the 2000 to 2023. Whew. All right, so that's just outside of Ryan Leaf, so take him out. We're talking Larry English, Buster Davis. Who else are we talking? Jonas Mouton.
Ooh.
This is off the top of my head.
What's our lineman from Bama?
DJ Fluker?
Fluker. Yeah, Fluker's in there.
Teal?
Larry English.
Teal was a second rounder, wasn't he?
Yeah, he was.
He was. Garrett meant it doesn't say.
Did he? Oh, okay. I'm sorry. I immediately thought first round.
McKitty. Too soon.
It was pretty bad though.
He was.
Joshua Perry was a bad one.
I thought Perry was going to
Yeah,
be good.
but
Man,
that
sucked.
was.
I like Perry.
Yeah.
Kevin
Now
Reese.
that was a
Tevin Reese.
7-rounder though. That's hard. Yeah.
Somebody just
Craig
said it.
Mager.
Craig Mager. I was thinking that too.
And
all these bad Craig draft picks.
I got another one, but I feel bad even mentioning his name.
Did he pass away or
I
something?
think somebody
Yeah,
already did. Somebody just put it in the chat.
Oh,
yeah, Max Turk.
Yeah. Okay.
Turk.
Yeah, but that's still. I feel like it's got to be a first rounder that didn't pan out.
If we're saying first rounders, to me, it's going to be Larry English. They got way too cute with that.
I mean, wasn't Buster Davis drafted in that window?
Yeah, but
yeah.
I dislike Larry English. I mean, for the impact that he was supposed to make. I mean, what was the expectation of Buster Davis? Like, was he going to come in and be wide receiver 1 or 2?
I assume you take a guy in the first round, they're thinking wide receiver 1.
But they just did that this year. And this dude ain't wide receiver 1, 2, or 3, even though someone apparently lied to him about it.
So, Sammy Davis was a good callback. That was 2000.
Wasn't he
horrible.
Second round pick?
I don't think he was in the first. I think he was second.
No, he was first.
Was he?
Davis was first?
Yeah, that was when I almost said Chargers were really good. I think it's got to be like the 29th or 30th pick. It was late in the draft, but I'm almost positive. It was 2003, I want to say. Antoine Cason. There's some good names. Jerry Tillery.
The weird part is there were some of these guys that were actually okay for a little bit. And I mean, they didn't pan out as first round, locks.
Yeah.
But some of these dudes were okay. I'm talking about just like the bustiest of the busts.
Yeah.
Let's see.
He's looking up Sammy Davis. Okay, so basically I think we landed on Buster Davis, Jonas Mouton.
Was Mouton a first round pick?
Mouton wasn't a first rounder, right?
He wasn't?
He was like a second or third round.
Okay. Larry English?
Definitely Larry English in my book.
Larry English.
Their first round picks actually, I mean, they've gotten some decent production out of them. I mean,
okay.
I'd say Murray was pretty bad.
So give me some of the bad names. Was Sammy Davis in the first round?
He was.
Ooh, 30th?
Where was he?
2003,
2003.
Yeah.
Number 30. Yeah.
Oh, man. Damn, I can't believe I got that.
Tell him what he's won.
Woo!
So let's see. They didn't have a first round pick in 2000.
Okay.
2001 was LT. 2002 was Jammer, who got ripped a lot, but he was actually a pretty good football player.
Yeah,
Sammy Davis Jr. in 2003.
Bad.
Eli in 2004.
Which turned into
Rivers. Merriman and Luis Castillo in 2005.
Good.
Castillo was a good football player before he got hurt.
Boy.
Cromartie.
Good.
Craig Davis. Cason. Larry English, Ryan Matthews, Corey Leggett.
Leggett had a good season or two to get a contract.
He actually, he wasn't like a superstar, but he was pretty productive, and they were playing him out of position quite a bit.
Yeah. He wasn't good, but he wasn't a bust, I don't think.
Yeah, I wouldn't say I don't think he belongs on the worst list.
No.
Ingram, Fluker. This is a tough one because he was never available.
Jason Verrett.
What could have been?
Yeah.
He might be, just because of the way things worked out, he might be pretty high on that list. Gordon.
Yeah.
Bosa, Williams, Derwin, Tillery.
We got a Pro Bowl year out of Verrett, though, didn't we?
Yep.
I don't
It
think
is.
we got Jack
We did.
Tillery's up really high
Squat.
up there.
out of Larry English or Jerry Tillery.
Tillery and Murray, I think, belong on that list for sure.
Okay.
So
I
I guess
would
the third spot would
Slater,
have to go
Zion.
to what either.
So
Really?
give me Larry English, Sammy Davis, or Jerry Tillery.
Jerry Tillery. Ooh, we
What about
hate
Murray?
Tillery.
I can't put. I don't. I mean, he's bad, but he's just whatever. He's definitely not worth the first round pick. I think I'm going Larry English.
I mean, they traded up for Murray, and he's been a liability for the better part of 5 years. 4
When you
years.
consider that they sacrificed draft capital, I mean, if all things considered, it just depends on how you're viewing it. How much are you putting into? Are you just looking at the pick itself or everything that surrounds it? Because if it's just the pick in the vacuum and their level of production as first round draft picks, then I think it makes the choice a little bit easier. But if we're talking about what they may have sacrificed to get some of these guys, then yeah, we're adding a bit to it and makes it a little bit more complicated.
Probably
English-
comes down to Sammy Davis and English.
English was
The third
a
spot?
Larry English was this 16th overall pick. I mean, he was a high draft pick, and
Yeah,
he never
was
had
a
more
little
than
one.
3 sacks a year. He was bad.
He didn't even play very much, I don't think.
No, it was one of those classic
No.
reach. It was a classic reach. Yeah, one of those. And we need a position, and so we're going to get.
He was
what-
a role player. I don't think he had more than like 6 or 7 starts, like in a season. I mean, he was
pretty
bad.
bad.
Hold on, I'm gonna look it up. So we're landing on Larry English, we think?
What is it between English and Tillery for the third spot?
Larry English. Larry English had the most starts in a season was 5 in 2013. Whew. Dang. And in his second year, he had 3 sacks, which was his career high. Yikes.
Yeah, he was bad.
All right, we got to move on to these bad tweets. What did we land on? Buster Davis, English? What do we? Where
It's
are
probably
we?
got to be English based on where he was picked because Tillery was at the end of the first round. He sucked, but he was still at the end of the first round. So.
Yeah.
Yep, I'd say English.
All right, cool. Bad tweets. Here we go. We're way over an hour, and now we're getting to the fun stuff. This one, I left the person's name on here. I usually take it off, but I got to keep this on. Retweet. This is from ML Football, who's one of those like football aggregator accounts that are terrible. And he says, retweet to help our friend. And if you're listening, this is in all caps. The legendary Will Clapp to the 2023 Pro Bowl. Hashtag Pro Bowl vote Will Clapp.
This is a joke, right?
No,
Like
this
he's
is
being ironic.
no.
This is a troll.
This is a real, and so I dug, and in the comments, people were like, "I'm not doing that," and they were like, "Will Clapp's a good guy." Like there were responses about like he's a good guy. So clearly they have some kind of friendship with Will Clapp. That's a real thing. But
Cool. Be friends
man.
with Will Clapp, but don't waste our time with this bullshit. Like,
yeah,
Yo, I've already
be
said
friends
it.
all you want.
I know
We
he's a
share the
meme,
same
but-
high school alma mater, and if he was hitchhiking on the side of the road, I would pretend I didn't see him. It's unfortunate. But
I
true.
get the beam and everything, but come on, man. Will Clapp. I know it's a popularity contest, but he not like this.
But you have to be popular to win a popularity contest.
That meme has gone far and wide, Will Clapp, but I don't know that this makes any sense.
Hey,
and
yo.
boy, this is terrible. What?
Another immature joke.
Okay.
I'll let it pass.
Oh, okay. All right. Well, come on.
Don't let it pass. That's what we're
All
here
right,
for. Come
I
on.
know. All
Far
right.
and wide, Will Clapp.
Oh, nah.
You could do a bunch of stuff with that, but it wasn't worth it.
No, I'm glad you kept that in the holster. That
Yeah,
wasn't a good one.
yeah.
All right. Next one here. This is long, by the way. He took every single character that Twitter gives you. Some people just refuse to see the big picture when it comes to Justin Herbert. If you keep losing close games and national TV games, it's not only the coach. Sure, Brandon Staley's going to get fired, but he's not alone in this. A great quarterback isn't only about stats. They aren't only about arm talent, because honestly, Herbert is one of the top 3. What's missing in their evaluation is impact on teammates. Pat Mahomes, Jalen Hurts, and Joe Burrow make their guys believe. Tom Brady, Peyton Manning, Drew Brees made their guys believe. With some quarterbacks, it doesn't matter if they are behind on the scoreboard or the score is very close. They will their team to victory. Right now, Justin Herbert simply isn't capable of that. That felt like an essay.
Why I hate Herbert, college dissertation or something. Listen, I dare this person to go back and all those names that he listed up there. Go take a look at what surrounded those players that made their players believe. I'm sure you'll find something in common with all of those names that you can't relate to Justin Herbert. But again, context doesn't actually matter with these people. They have agendas, they fly with them. So have at it. Just, if you want to paint the picture the way that you want it to be presented, go for it. But this is a lie. Yeah. I'm good with it though. Do you think?
Go ahead, Jimmy.
I was just going to say, I think it's funny that he's talking about seeing the bigger picture and he's boiling everything down to the quarterback because you're missing the big picture. The offensive line, the lack of protection, no running game, only Keenan Allen. I mean, he's literally throwing his third wide receiver right now, maybe arguably his second wide receiver right now, is a 31-year-old guy off the street who should be selling insurance.
Mm-hmm.
They don't have a viable option at tight end. They can't run the ball. And despite all of that, Herbert is leading go-ahead touchdown drives in the final 4 or 5 minutes of the game almost every week, only to see the defense give it up immediately. But that's on Herbert.
Yeah.
Cool. That is the laziest, most ridiculous analysis. I mean, wins are not quarterback stats. I don't care who says they are. They are not. And if you're watching the Chargers game and you're watching the hits he's taking and the lack of separation and the complete absence of any kind of weapons on offense, and you're coming away saying this is on Herbert, the team doesn't believe in him, well, I think it's a you problem, not a Herbert problem.
I think people should get their own opinions and stop stealing them from TV shows because this sounds quite familiar, actually.
For me, some of the criteria of a bad tweet is like no hard evidence. Like there's a lot in here. This is like word salad, but he never or she never says exactly what it is that they have. Like, what is that thing? What is that tangible thing that those quarterbacks, those 6 that they named, have that Herbert doesn't? Is it willingness?
Garrett.
What is it? Tell me what it is. Well, I mean, what are we measuring? What is the measuring stick here? This doesn't make any sense. And I don't know what that they would like. They make them believe like they're good salesmen. Like, is it that they're captains? They're good teammates. Their willingness to win. I don't know what this is. And that's what makes that so bad. Is I don't know what this is. And as Charles Michael Sinclair says, Breeze and Manning were also 500 quarterbacks in their first 4 seasons. So it's not all over for Justin Herbert.
I mean, go ahead. I didn't mean to cut you off. I was just going to say, everybody likes to point to Breeze as the example, but Breeze he couldn't keep Doug Flutie off the field. He was ushered out of town when he got injured so they could draft, they could play Rivers. I mean, he was on his way out of the league. And when he got hurt, when the Saints signed him, nobody else believed he was going to be healthy. And the Saints were desperate. So let's not rewrite history here. Let's not make shit up to further our argument. I mean, the guys that he mentioned that are playing right now, Mahomes, Hurts, Burrow, those guys are playing with some of the best coached, best run organizations in the NFL. They have some of the best talent surrounding them. Hurts has by far the best offensive line in the league, one of the best running games in the league, one of the best pass rushes in the league, and one of the best skill player groups on offense in the league.
And a GM who apparently knows where all the bones are buried because he gets players from everyone for basically nothing.
Yeah, they get whatever they want whenever they want it. So let's just provide the proper context if we're going to make a stupid fucking argument like this. It's ridiculous.
All right, last one. And boy, is it a doozy. When you guys make sure you get back on Twitter and retweet it, it's a graphic of Rex Ryan in a Charger uniform. Rex Ryan, hashtag Rex Ryan, Chargers head coach. Everyone retweet this. 2 exclamation points. This is it.
I'm not doing
Welcome. This is who the Chargers deserve, really, at this point. This is who they deserve. Not who I want, but that's who they deserve. Can you think of a realistic option that's worse than Rex Ryan? Like Urban Meyer comes to mind, but he's not realistic.
His brother?
Oh, Dennis.
No.
Rob Ryan. Yeah,
Rob, there you go.
Rob Ryan. Yep, that'd be a bad one. Oh, Josh McDaniels.
Gruden.
For
would be bad. Reasons. But yeah, the problem is we just hate feet. And that's what it really comes down to. Spiked, you're back. Thank you.
I don't hate feet. I just hurt. I hate fat, obnoxious blowhards with a personal axe to grind. The fact that Rex Ryan has a national platform is absurd. The guy has been personally attacking Brandon Staley since the day he got hired. He cannot help but take cheap shots at him on TV. Everything he says about Staley, and look, Staley deserves to get fired at this point. I'm not saying otherwise, but everything he says about Staley is personally motivated. It is personal attacks every chance he gets because Staley took Anthony Lynn's job. I can't stand that guy. I can't stand the fact that he's got a national platform, and this shit pisses me off. I saw this in the Discord. I was furious. This irritates the hell out of me that somebody would want to bring this jerk off on and make him the head coach. I cannot tell you how much this pisses me off.
No. Keep telling us. Keep going. Yeah. It's your night. It's your turn. Yeah. Garrett had his. Yeah. It's your go.
You heard it. Jamie doesn't hate feet. He just hates
Rex Ryan.
Yeah. Okay. And Craig, Buster Smith, thanks for joining us.
I tell you what. We can keep this going because I can come up with some nicknames too. I'm fine with it. We can do it all night long, man. Was that Lionel Richie? You can play this tune all night long.
All night long. Yep. Mm-hmm. All right. Well, listen, we're getting punchy. It's like almost 90 minutes now. All right. Thanks, guys and gals, for joining us. Appreciate you guys. We got after hours coming up after the game against the Patriots, and we will see you next time.
Thanks, everybody.
Salute.